So he deserted her, means left her by herself. That's to desert someone, to strand them, leave them stranded. Dessert with 2 S's is a sweet course or a dish served at the end of a meal. It's usually at the end of a meal. In some cultures they also eat dessert at the beginning of the meal, so it really depends. The host served pudding and cake for dessert. So dessert and dessert are 2 different things. Disinterested and uninterested. A lot of people don't know the difference between these 2 terms. So when you lack interest in something, you're uninterested. Disinterested means you're impartial. So it's an objective way when you don't take sides in an argument. Impartial. That's disinterested. When you pass judgment on a case with an impersonal, unbiased outlook, that's disinterested. Disinterested is a compliment. I have seen even like the top HR managers, I've seen even professors sometimes who don't know the difference between disinterested and uninterested. There was one time the chief of HR of a company was questioning somebody, why are you disinterested? You seem disinterested in work. He doesn't know the difference between disinterested and uninterested. So, uninterested means bored, there's no interest. But disinterested means when you have no vested interest. When you're impartial, like a judge must be disinterested. So think about, when you come across disinterested, think about a judge. Impartial. Uninterested means lack of interest. A judge hearing a court case should be disinterested, but definitely not uninterested. He must take a lot of interest in it, but with a disinterested outlook, means with an impartial outlook. So Mary found herself overqualified for the job and soon became uninterested in their new work. The mother passed judgment on her son in a disinterested manner, means in an impartial way. Economic and economical. Economic has to do with the management of money. Former Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was famous for his amazing economic reforms. So, let's say a woman hated her husband, but she continued to live with him for financial reasons or economic, reasons. So that's to do with money. Economical means less expensive, sparing in the use of resources or money when you're conservative. So, Rita purchased a house in the suburbs as it was more economical to live outside the city and travel longer for work than to purchase a house in the heart of the city. So if you had to take a taxi to go somewhere and it would cost you 1,000 rupees, but you take public transport, you take a bus instead and pay 100 rupees, then because it's more economical, it costs less money. That's what it means. Economical means something that costs less money. It's more conservative. Economic means anything to do with money, like financial. That's what it means. Auger and auger. So, an auger with an E is a long flexible steel coil for dislodging stoppages in curved pipes. So imagine there's a curved pipe and there's a stoppage. So you use a tool called an auger. So the workman used an auger to remove filth from the pipe. So it's kind of difficult to remember, but auger is like something you use to take off filth from a pipe. That's an auger. It's a tool, a noun. And augur means be a sign of something to come, especially something important or bad. The clouds augur rainfall means the clouds indicate there is going to be rainfall. And when there is a kind of symbol that happens, they say it augurs good luck. So, for example, in India there's a superstition. So, if there's a black cat that crosses your path, it augurs bad luck. I'm sure it doesn't, but there's a superstition about it. So, augur means to indicate something that's going to happen. Practice and practice. So, both mean the same thing. One can be used as a verb, other as a noun. In British English, the noun practice is written with a C and the verb to practice is written with an S. Both words are pronounced the same way. In American English, both are usually written with a C. Remember, to practice is followed by the ing form. So Mary practiced singing all day long. Somebody practiced knitting. Somebody practiced, eating or something. So usually it's followed by the ing, usually. The concept is great in theory but not in practice. So here we use the noun form with a C. Mary wants to practice speaking German. So here we use the S. If you're using British English, you can also use the C. So when it's a noun, you always use the C. And when it's a verb, you can use the S or the C. In American English, we use the C. So if your GMAT or GRE is going to be graded by an American agency, you better use C for practice, whether it's a verb or a noun. The eye surgeon opened his own private practice. So there's a C again. Eminent and imminent. So eminent means reputed, prominent or well known. Imminent means something that is likely to happen soon or immediately. Eminent means popular, reputed. Kalidasa is an eminent scholar. So Narendra Modi is an eminent politician. And imminent means something that's going to happen immediately. So the blissfully sleeping inhabitants of the village were unaware of the earthquake that was about to happen, that was imminent. So the earthquake was imminent. So you can say, for example, when there's so much conflict between two countries, war is imminent, means it's likely to happen. And there are so many dark clouds in the sky, rain is imminent, means it's likely to happen. Endemic and epidemic. Endemic is something that is found regularly in a particular place. Lake shores are regions where malaria is endemic, as mosquitoes lay eggs on still water. So where there's a lake, malaria is endemic, means it's found regularly in places where there are lakes. So just because there's a lake, it doesn't mean there's malaria, but it's usually found in places where there are lakes. So that's endemic. Epidemic is the outbreak of disease affecting a large number of people. The villagers had to abandon their homes and live in tents at the outskirts of the village when the plague epidemic struck. So an epidemic is a highly contagious disease. Like there's all these big rats which would spread plague, and people had to leave their homes and take shelter somewhere else. That plague was an epidemic. Cholera is an epidemic, means a disease that spreads. So endemic means not necessarily related to a disease. So you could say where there is a lot of unemployed people living, usually the crime rate is higher. So gangsters and crimes are endemic to regions where their employment rate is higher, right? So that's another example of endemic. Epidemic means essentially relating to a disease. Endemic doesn't have to relate to a disease. Explicit and implicit. Explicit means something that is shown or expressed clearly. When you state something clearly and directly, that's explicit. Implicit means implied, though not openly stated, or absolute. So it is explicitly stated in the user agreement that the user must purchase the content on the website and use it at his own risk. You state it explicitly, so nobody can sue you for that. So you can say, she explicitly told him she loved him. Sometimes you say it implicitly. So if you give a red rose to someone, or you bake a cake for someone, you give flowers to someone, it's kind of implicit. You're kind of expressing interest, but not exactly by saying it outright. So think about this example, explicit and implicit. You tell someone, I love you, that's explicit. Implicit is when you drop hints. You ask them out on a date and give them a rose, that's kind of implicit. The priest had an implicit faith in Hanuman, the monkey god. So implicit can also mean absolute, something that cannot change, something that nobody can destroy the faith of, like something that is so true that nobody can shake it. That's all absolute. That's also one of the meanings of implicit. The priest had such an implicit faith, means such absolute faith in Hanuman the monkey god. So that's another way to use implicit. Advise and advice. So advise with an S means to offer suggestions about the best course of action to someone. Inform about a situation. So advise means to offer advice. It's a verb, and it can also mean to inform someone about something that's happening. So she advised her daughter not to marry Tom. She advised her, gave her words of wisdom. That's advice. Another way is when you say the patient was advised about the surgical procedure that he was about to undergo. Means he was informed. So the let's say the client was advised by the lawyer about the proceedings in the court. So let's say the lawyer represented this client in the court, and there's all these things that happened, so he comes and advises the client. Means he informs them, updates them about what happened. That's another way in which you can use advise. Advice means, this is a noun form with a C. Guidance or recommendations concerning prudent future action, typically given by someone regarded as knowledgeable or authoritative. She sought legal advice from an attorney. So advice is noun. Advise is a verb. Euphemism and euphonious. Euphemism is to express something unpleasant in a pleasant way. Euphonious means sounding pleasant. They are two very different things. So, my parents are under the ground is a euphemism for my parents are dead. Instead of saying he died, you say he reached his heavenly abode. That's just a more pleasant way of saying he died. That's a euphemism. And euphonious. So, the euphonious song of the nightingale brightened her day. So, where there is the term phone involved, usually it's related to sound. So, euphonious means something pleasant sounding. Facilitate and felicitate. So, facilitate means to make easy. The donations from the rich landlord facilitated the opening of a new orphanage. So, the donations from the rich landlord facilitated means it helped something happen. Felicitate means to congratulate. So, the minister felicitated the athlete who won an Olympic gold medal. Felicitation means when you reward someone, like in a ceremony. Reward is felicitate. Like you congratulate them in public, that's felicitation. And facilitate means to help something happen. Farther and further. So farther, sometimes further can also be used in this context. Farther is used with reference to distance. The sun is farther from the earth than the moon. Further means to a great extent or a degree. It doesn't necessarily have to deal with distance. She took an education loan from the bank to further her education. Means to attain a higher degree of education. The sun is farther from the earth than the moon. We could also say the sun is further away from the earth than the moon. Hard and hardly. A lot of people don't know the difference between this, and it's kind of funny when they interchange these terms. To work hard means to put in a lot of effort. It's when something is difficult to understand, to do, or experience, or using a lot of physical or mental effort. It's hard to know what to do means it's difficult. Jane tried hard to improve herself. Hard work will pay off. Hardly means almost not. It's the opposite of hard. So to work hard means to put in a lot of effort. To work hardly means you hardly ever do any work. You don't do any work. She ate hardly anything means she didn't eat anything. Dave knew hardly anybody at the party means he didn't know anybody at the party. So remember, in the context of working hard, a lot of people make fools of themselves. They say, I worked so hardly on this project. What they mean to say is, I worked hard on this project. That's different. It's the opposite when you say, I worked hardly on the project. To work hard and work hardly are opposite. Just remember it. That's easy to remember. Historic and hysteric. Historic is something that is famous or significant in history. The Taj Mahal is a historic monument in Agra. Hysteric is a state of uncontrolled emotion. When you laugh hysterically, for example, or you cry hysterically, usually it's used with like laughing. So the kids were hysteric when the clown performed at the circus. So they laughed hysterically, uncontrollably. That's hysterical. And that's very different from historic. Historic means related to history or significance. Hanged and hung. So hung is the past of the verb to hang, like, most of the time. So to hang means it's used in a particular context, like when you're sentencing someone to death. When somebody is hanged to death, you can't say he was hung to death. He was hanged with a rope. That's hanging to death. And the past tense is hanged. So you can also hang a painting, but the past tense of hang in that case would be hung. You can't say I hanged the painting in the living room. That would be very, very inappropriate. You say I hung the painting in the living room. But you hang a criminal to death. The criminal was hanged to death. You don't say he was hung to death. So when you say hanged, it's like hanged to death. Okay? Think about that. And hung, think about like when you hung a painting on the wall. Okay? But when you're using it in the present tense, you can hang a painting, you can hang a criminal. Hang and hang is okay. But the past tense, hung is very different from hanged. Okay? Luxurious and luxuriant. So luxurious means fine, rich, lavish, expensive. Luxurious, think about luxurious bungalow, a luxurious growth of grass. The millionaire showed off his luxurious bungalow to the visitors. Luxuriant is something that grows healthily. But if you're talking about something that grows healthily, like a living object, okay? Luxuriant growth of grass and a luxuriant growth of green trees in the forest. The rains help the trees to develop luxuriant green leaves and colorful flowers. So in this context of a living thing that grows healthily, it's luxuriant. You can't say luxurious. Luxurious means rich and wealthy. So remember the difference. When you think about luxuriant, think about something that's growing, like grass and trees and plants and flowers. That's luxuriant, healthy growth. And luxurious means rich and wealthy. Okay? Imaginary and imaginative. Imaginary is something that is not real. The psychiatrist told her that her fears and problems were imaginary. Means she was imagining that she had all these problems. They didn't really exist. And say the square root of -1 is an imaginary number. It doesn't exist. We can't imagine, but it exists. So it's kind of unreal, but it exists. I mean, it's imaginary. Imaginative means creative, showing the use of one's imagination. The child's painting of a celestial nymph was highly imaginative and won the first prize. Imaginative means displays creativity. And imaginary means something that's imagined, it doesn't exist. Most of her health problems were imaginary. Means she just enjoys grumbling about them. Her problems are imaginary. Figuratively and literally. Figuratively means metaphoric speech, not exact or serious in meaning. So, figuratively is the opposite of literally. Literally means exact, literal, realistic meaning of the words. So when you say, she died laughing, figuratively means there was such a funny joke, she died laughing. Means she didn't literally die, but it was metaphorical, means she laughed so much. But if you're saying it literally, so there's this old woman, she died laughing, means she was laughing and the next thing you know, she died. So she died laughing. That's like literal. And figuratively is when you use it in a metaphorical way. Incredible and incredulous. Incredible is difficult or impossible to believe. And incredulous means not willing or able to believe something. So we talked about credible and credulous in one of my previous slides. And these two words are the opposite of credible and credulous. Her claims to have strong connections with the royal family seemed far-fetched and incredible. Means they are difficult to believe. Incredible. Incredulous means not willing or able to believe it. The wife was incredulous when the cops informed her that her husband had died in the car accident. She's like, what? I don't believe it. That's incredulous. Or you say, your friend was arrested for drug trafficking. It's like, that's incredulous. I mean, so the friend is incredulous. I don't believe it. That's incredulous. Incredible means it's a lie. It's difficult to believe. That's what is incredible. Lose and lose. So a lot of people make mistakes in this as well in the GRE GMAT exams. So to lose, pronounced with the Z sound, is a verb meaning to not have something anymore, to be unable to find something, or to not win. You lose your cell phone, you lose your way while driving somewhere. So I don't want my baseball team to lose the game. So here we say LOSE with a single O. She will lose her money in gambling. So lose. So that is LOSE with a single O. Lose with an S sound, on the other hand, is an adjective that means free, unattached, or not tight. It's also a verb meaning to untie or let go of something. The door handle fell off because it was too loose. The loose sweater makes you look fat. Loose means something that's not tight. Loose with two O's. So loose, think about a loose sweater. But to lose means to lose your cell phone. Okay, so they're two different things. And many people make mistakes in using lose and lose. So be very careful about this. Industrial and industrious. Industrial is a word to describe things which relate to industry. So J.R.D. Tata pioneered several industrial reforms in India and opened several companies. Industrial means anything related to the industry. So let's say lowballing for projects is not an accepted industrial norm. So most companies have to bid at least at the minimum price. You can't lowball and win a project. That's against the industrial norms. Means related to the industry. Industrious means hardworking or diligent. So ants are industrious insects that slog in the summers to save food for the winters. Industrious means anyone who's hardworking. Let's talk about intercede and intervene. Intercede is to speak in favor or behalf of. Her boyfriend interceded and stopped the boys from bullying her. So to intercede means to intervene. So it's kind of similar to intervene, but to intercede is when you intervene and speak in favor of something. That's intercede. When you intervene and usually you stop something. You don't speak in favor of something. So suppose there's an argument going on. You intervene and stop it. That's intervene. You cannot say intercede usually. So somebody is bullying somebody. So somebody intercedes and saves the person. So you get the difference? Intercede is when you go in between and speak in favor of. Intervene means to interrupt or to stop. So the host intervened and requested the politician to wind up his long speech in another 5 minutes. So they sent this politician up on stage and he's talking forever, a long-winded speech. So the host intervened and asked him to stop in 5 minutes. So that's an intervention, okay? Jest and zest. Jest means humor. Think about jester. A jester is a clown. The stand-up comedian was renowned for his jest and wit. But zest means enthusiasm. The old granny was filled with zest for life even in her 90s. Zest means enthusiasm. Jest means something funny, humor. So next set of words. Sensible and sensitive. So sensible means pragmatic, having an awareness or understanding of a situation. Although she earns a meager income, she manages her finances in a very sensible way. That's different from sensitive. Sensitive means easily influenced, changed or damaged, especially by a physical activity or effect, easily upset by things people say or do, or causing people to be upset, embarrassed, or angry. Many wondered about how to broach the sensitive topic of divorce to her husband. So for example, if you have a sensitive stomach, so you eat a few things, you eat outside somewhere, and you ended up with a stomach upset. So that's a sensitive stomach. So if a girl is very sensitive, means people say some things to her and she gets easily unhappy or angry or offended. So it's very sensitive. And some people, they just don't care. They are insensitive. So sensitive also means to be careful to one's needs. So if you're a guest in somebody's house and the host is very sensitive to your needs, means she makes sure you get enough food and sleep and make sure you're comfortable, so she's sensitive. So for example, suppose somebody comes to your house and they've been sitting there for like 7 hours and you don't offer them anything to eat or drink. That's kind of insensitive. So sensitive also means to be careful, to be attentive to something. And it also means it's something that's easily influenced. So sensible means a practical, pragmatic way of dealing things. These are two different words. Advise and advice. So advise is a verb and advice is a noun. So when a professor advises his advisees, so an advisor is someone who advises, advisee is the student who is getting the advice. When a professor advises his advisees, he gives them advice. So advice is a noun and advice with an S is a verb. Take my advice and end this marriage. I can advise or I can give advice. We advise you to hire a lawyer. Momentary and momentous. Momentary means lasting only for a short time. The fireworks were momentary but splendid. Momentary means lasting only for a few moments. Momentous is something of very great importance. The drafting of the constitution of the nation is a momentous task. So carrying those bags up the hill was a momentous task. Negligent and negligible. Negligent means careless or reckless. She was negligent enough to leave her baby sleeping in the car in the hot sunny afternoon while she shopped. Negligent means when you don't take care of your responsibilities, when you're irresponsible, careless, reckless. That's negligent. Negligible means it's so small or insignificant that it's not worthy of attention. The rise in the level of seawater seems negligible, but it's really enough to submerge the whole of Manhattan under 1 foot of water in just another century. So people, try to say, the level of water is rising by a few inches every year. It seems like negligible, right? 2 inches every year is negligible because of all the icebergs melting and the global warming and pollution. But if you just cumulatively add it up in over a century, it could submerge the whole of Manhattan in 1 foot of water. Now that's something cause for big concern. So negligible means something insignificant, okay? So the amount of salt you add in food is negligible, but it makes all the difference in the taste. So negligible means a small amount. Negligent means when you don't fulfill your responsibilities. Ordinance and ordinance. So ordinance is a law or an order or a statute. The government issued stricter ordinance related to women's safety after the Delhi gang rape case. Ordinance means a law, order. Ordnance refers to ammunition or weapons. The ship carried ordnance to the site of the battle. So there's just a difference of an I over here. Ordnance means weapons, ammunition. Think about that. Ordinance is a law. Quiet and quiet. Quiet means making very little or no noise. So keep quiet. It was so quiet except for the rustle of the leaves. Quiet. A lot of people really don't know the difference. And keep quiet. Keep quiet. So I've seen people who actually, students who actually write keep quiet, QUITE, that's wrong. Quiet. Quiet is with silent, no noise. Quite means fairly, almost, or rather completely. That's quite scary. That's not quite cold. I think it would be quite easy to answer this exam today. Quite means a degree of something. It's fairly easy, or, it's almost, done. That you say it's quite easy, or it's quite scary. So that's how you use quite. Plausible, probable, possible. So, plausible is something that seems to be true. Her illness was a plausible explanation for her poor performance in the exam. Plausible means that something that seems to be true. So, suppose a student is usually doing well and then in one exam she did poorly. So, her illness is a plausible explanation for her poor performance. Probable is something that has a good chance of being true. Sherlock Holmes used to tell his assistant, Dr. Watson, it's more than possible, it's highly probable. Possible means feasible, it's doable. So something is either possible or impossible. So, the Panama Canal makes it possible for ships to easily navigate from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. So they dug the canal and the ships can easily navigate. So it makes it possible for them to do it. But what is the probability of finding a ship at any point of time in the Panama Canal? The probability is very low. At any point of time there may be only a handful of ships. So, but then when you're investigating a murder case, for example, so you have the list of all the suspects and say, it's possible that this person could have committed the murder. But then the detective says it's not merely possible, it's highly probable because we found his footprints on the floor, and we found his fingerprints on the knife. So it's not possible, merely possible, it's highly probable. So when you say it's probably going to rain today, probably means you have some indicators. There's dark clouds in the sky and the weather forecast said it's going to rain, so it's probably going to rain. So, or you say there is a possibility of rain today, means there's a slight chance of rain today. So probable is a higher degree of probabilities than a possibility. So plausible means something that seems to be true. Popular and populous, they are two different terms altogether. Popular means famous, well-known, reputed, something or someone that's liked by many. So J.K. Rowling became popular due to her Harry Potter books. We all use the term popular very commonly. So popular means famous, we all know that. Populous means densely or thickly populated. Mumbai is a highly populous city with the rich and poor living next to each other. Populous, think about densely populated, like Mumbai or New York, okay? That's populous. Gorilla and guerrilla. A gorilla is a large primate or an ape. Gorillas are powerful hairy animals found in jungles. A guerrilla is a member of an irregular military that uses surprise attacks on its enemy. So instead of having a planned military attack where you have all these formations, different ways of attacking, all these rules and things like that, guerrilla warfare uses surprise attacks. So suppose an enemy is marching down, the invader is walking through the canyon, okay, between the hills. And then all these people are hiding in the hills, the guerrilla warriors, and they throw stones and throw all these things and they kill those enemies. That's like guerrilla warfare. As opposed to a planned, organized battle where you give a notice to someone saying, we're going to come to battle if you don't do this, and then there's all these things, and they meet and they fight. That's like a planned battle. But a guerrilla warfare is like an ambush, a surprise attack. So Shivaji, the king of India, Shivaji used guerrilla warfare to attack Muslim invaders by hiding in the mountains with his troops. So when you think of guerrilla warfare, think of Shivaji and his troops hiding in the mountains and surprise attacks. That is guerrilla warfare. And a gorilla, we all know what a gorilla is. Come on, it's similar to a chimpanzee, similar to an orangutan. It's a primate. It's like a big monkey, a strong, big, hairy animal. So, raise, rise, and raise. These are three different words. Raise is to lift or move something to a higher level. The pay hike helped raise her standard of living. Or you can raise children, you enable them to grow up. You raise the table from the ground floor to the first floor. Raise it. Or you raise the height of the bed. That's a raise. Rise is an increase in quantity, number, position, etc. The child watched the ocean level rise as the high tide set in. So if there's a tsunami or like a high tide, you watch the ocean level rise. You watch the sun rise. So it's an increase in quantity, number, or position. A raise is when you are putting an effort to lift or move or raise something up. Or like somebody gives you a raise in salary. Somebody has to give you a raise, an increase. But the sun rises. Okay, we don't say the sun raises. The sun rises. The ocean level rises. Raise is to destroy completely. The forest fire raised the trees to ashes. So you raise something means, like say when there's a bulldozer that comes, they raise the buildings. So destroy completely, that is to raise. Recourse and resource. So all we're doing is interchange the C and the S, and they mean two different things. Recourse means to seek help from. The farmers sought recourse from the rich landlord to help repay their debts. So you seek recourse in something for help. So you say, I sought recourse in my spiritual guru to help, save my father's life. So when it's raining, you look for recourse in an abandoned shelter or under the trees. That's recourse, to seek help from. A resource is something one can use to increase one's wealth or get work done. Deforestation is causing natural resources such as trees and animals to deplete at an alarming rate. A resource is something you use to get some work done. So if I'm recording this video, I used a camcorder. That was my resource. And I used a person to help me, prepare this PowerPoint. That person was also a resource, a human resource. So resource is anything that helps you get work done. And recourse means to seek help from. Venal and venial. Venal refers to the willingness to do dishonest or immoral things for money. The venal minister was ready to betray his king for money. Venal means ready to cheat for money. Venial refers to usually a minor offense or sin or fault that can be easily forgiven. The queen pardoned the maid for the venial offense of damaging her necklace. So you damage the queen's necklace. That is an offense, but it can be forgiven. It's not such a big crime. So the queen pardoned the maid because it was for the venial offense, means it was an easily forgivable offense. But if she murdered the prince, that's not a venial offense. That's a major crime. So venial means like a forgivable offense. Venal means ready to cheat. Remember, venal has nothing to do with veins or anything like that. Venal means willingness to be dishonest. Venal, dishonest. Venial, pardonable offense. Virtuous and virtuoso. Virtuous means being of good character, morally good. So Meera is a chaste and virtuous woman. So someone who is faithful and honest and leads a life of good character, that's virtuous. Virtuoso is someone who is good at a particular activity, especially a musical instrument. Say Anushka Shankar is a famous sitar virtuoso. So think about virtuoso, think about Anushka Shankar or Zakir Hussain at the tabla. So these are virtuosos, means they're very good at playing these musical instruments. Virtuous means anyone who has virtue. Foreword and forward. A foreword is a short introduction at the beginning of a book, usually written by someone other than an author. Deepak Chopra wrote the foreword for the young author's book on metaphysical concepts. So usually a book has a foreword given by a famous person. So if he's especially a young author trying to establish himself, and he has a foreword from a very famous author. So suppose Deepak Chopra or Tom Peters or some kind of famous speaker, or say Barack Obama, somebody gives you a foreword on the book saying, you know what, I read this book and I think it's really good and you must read it. Then it's going to make it sell better, right? So that front page introduction is called the foreword. That's a foreword, okay? It's the words written at the forefront of the book, the beginning of a book. Not every book has a foreword, remember. Forward is an adverb, indicates movement ahead or towards the front direction. The family is looking forward to Rita's wedding this year. Forward means looking ahead. So the snail inched forward slowly means you move forward. So that's forward is different from forward. Willing and willful. Willing is to be ready to do something. The company was willing to pay her for overtime hours. Willful is to show strong and unreasonable determination to have one's way. Willful means stubborn, unreasonable. Duryodhan's willful nature and strong hatred towards his cousins caused the Mahabharata war. Willful nature, so stubborn nature, unreasonable. That's willful. Remember, willful has a negative connotation to it. Willing means to be ready to do something. The company was willing to pay her for overtime hours. Yolk and yolk. Yolk is the yellow part of the egg. The yolk is thicker and more viscous than the egg white. Yoke is the wooden bar used on two animals so that they can work together. Like in a bullock cart or a horse-drawn cart, like they have the yoke and make the animals work together. Also referred to any controlling force. So metaphorically, figuratively, it's any force that makes you obey, that's called the yoke. Say, Indians suffered under the British yoke for many decades before gaining independence in 1947. So it means the British subjected Indians to many atrocities, and there were a lot of things they did wrong and unfair, and the Indians suffered under the yoke. So it's not like cattle, they literally had a yoke on their necks, no. But it's figurative. They suffered under the British yoke. So you can also say the farmer plowed the field with his two oxen by hitching them to a yoke. So yoke is different from yoke. So drown and sink. To drown is to suffocate by submerging in water or other fluid, to perish by such suffocation. The two boys watched in horror as their friend drowned while swimming in the river. So people and animals drown, they don't sink. So it's like if you're talking about someone who drowned in the river, drowned in the ocean, they always drown. And then, of course, their body probably sinks to the bottom if they're tied to a stone. Let's say, like say Osama bin Laden, he was buried in the ocean, in the sea, right? So they tied his body to a stone and it sank to the bottom of the ocean. So that's okay to say sink. But if Osama bin Laden was swimming in the ocean and he doesn't know swimming and he drowns, then you say he drowned in the ocean. We don't say he sank, okay? So I hope you get the difference. Sink refers to an inanimate object getting submerged and dropping to the bottom of a water body to cause a vessel to sink, generally by making it no longer watertight. So an iceberg caused the Titanic ship to sink in 1912. A ship or a boat always sinks because it's an object, it's not a living entity. Okay, suppose there's a water leakage somewhere, an object sinks to the bottom, okay? It doesn't drown, it sinks. But a person, if he doesn't know swimming or he's in the water body, like if it's the baby in the bathtub, and you raise the water level, suppose the mother turned the tap on and then went away somewhere, the water level increases and the baby drowns. You don't say the baby sinks, the baby drowns. Means it's suffocated by water and it dies. That is drowning. You can also use drown like figuratively, like, say, I'm drowned in miseries. So he was, drowned in happiness, or even you say drowned in alcohol. So it means he consumed too much alcohol. We say things like that. Drowned in miseries means there was so much misery that he was consumed by the misery. So that's the figurative use of drown. So sink is like, you can also use it as a verb. To sink a ship means like you go and create a hole in the ship and you make it sink. That is to sink. Or you can sink an object in a glass of water. So that's to make something sink. It can also be used as a verb. Attenuate and extenuate. Attenuate is reduced in strength. Physical therapy attenuates the effects of his heart attack. So you can say a person was attenuated after his surgery, means he didn't have much strength. And when you gave him physical therapy, it attenuated the effects of his heart attack, so it gave him strength. This is really like a double negative. So attenuate means reduced in strength. Extenuate, lessen or to try to lessen the seriousness or the extent of. The circumstances extenuate the crime. So suppose you walk into somebody's house and you want to rob them and you shoot them and rob them. That's a serious crime. But suppose that person has killed your sister or raped your sister, and that person has wounded you, and you think the person is a danger and you're drunk, and then you go and the person is trying to attack you and then you murder that person. The circumstances make it less offensive. So the judge might pardon you. So if you just do it in cold blood, that's a serious crime. But if there's situations which forces you to do something wrong, then we can say the circumstances extenuated the crime, meaning the crime was lessened in impact due to the circumstances. So dispel and expel. Dispel means to force to go away, used both with concrete and metaphoric meanings. Her spiritual guru dispelled her doubts about the odds of happy marriage with Tom. So let's say this woman had doubts about, if I marry Tom, will I be happy or not? I don't think I'm going to be happy if I marry Tom. And her spiritual guru dispelled her doubts. Means, he said, you're going to be happy. Expel, force to leave or move out. He was expelled from the university for academic dishonesty. So you can expel someone from the university or from the cabinet or from an institution. So dispel means to put to rest. Means you say, forced to go away. Means you tell someone, this is not going to happen, don't worry. That is to dispel. So you light a candle to provide light and dispel darkness. So when you light a candle, the darkness goes away. You dispel the darkness, not expel it. And let's say the teacher gives you knowledge to dispel your ignorance. Dispel is different from expel. Discrete and discrete. So discrete with CREET is different from CRETE. Discrete means modest, prudent, exercising self-restraint. And discrete means itemized, separate entities, sets or parts. So they are two very different things. So I've seen a lot of students make this spelling mistake when they're talking about like arithmetic or geometry, or they're talking about sets of something, okay, sets of words, sets of numbers. These are discrete sets. So we talk